experience, Johannes.
It's great to see such an attendance here. Yeah, recording has just started there. And just again for the recording, my name is Deirdre McIntyre. I head up the Academic Advisory Service for this programme, and I'm here tonight with Johannes, my colleague from UEL, academic writing tutor, and Siobhan from ISEP Europe. So I'll hand over to you, Johannes and Siobhan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deirdre. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you are all keeping well and you are in good frames of mind. I know we are currently grappling with challenges of COVID, and there are a lot of pressures, and studying and managing other aspects of your life does not make things easy. Today, we will be discussing essay structuring, referencing, and criticality. And as you can see, there are quite a number of skills that you will be required to demonstrate. And today's session will be packed with a lot of issues that we are going to discuss, concepts. I will try to go quite slowly, and whenever you don't understand, please put your question in the chat box, and I will stop and we will clarify issues, because the most important thing is for you to understand and gain the skills that will enable you to be competent writers. And especially at master's level, the skills that you are required to demonstrate are high level skills, and we are going to look at some of those. I will start by sharing with you the session objectives. So by the end of today, we should be able to write well-structured essays that have coherent ideas, be able to use evidence and arguments to write critical essays, and appropriately reference the sources that we use in our essays as evidence. And because writing is such a challenging task, sometimes to talk things at the theoretical level may not help at all. Therefore, to that end, I have structured some model text in forms of an introduction and a model paragraph for us to discuss and share ideas on how in reality do we craft an introduction, how do we craft a paragraph that conforms to the standards that are required at master's level. Therefore, we will start by looking at an essay question. If you are say you are given an essay, it could be a discussion of a contemporary issue in education. I want to give an example of an essay such as discuss critically a contemporary issue in education. There's a wide spectrum of these contemporary issues. It could be the issue of class in education. It could be an issue of gender. It could be an issue of disability. When you go on to discuss these issues, you are going to rely on a wide range of readings and sources. But then before you go on to your reading, you need to break up your essay topic. And you break up your essay topic into subjects, restrictions, and instructions. Breaking the essay into these three major components will enable you to be able to focus your reading, For example, I gave you an example of an essay that says critically discuss a contemporary issue in education. The issue is not specified. You are given, say, freedom to choose the issue, assuming you choose class. So, given that topic, which do you think is the subject of your the subject of the essay? I have classified the essay into three components: subjects, restrictions, and instructions. So if we can get some responses through the chat box, what the subjects of that topic would be. Right, any response? You are free to type your answers in the chat box, because we want this to be as interactive as possible. Or if you want to contribute verbally, just unmute yourself and give us the response, but then remember to mute after your contribution. Any volunteers? Okay, yeah. So there are no volunteers. Okay, I'll give you some hints. Right. So when you are given a topic like critically discuss a contemporary issue in education, the subject is a contemporary issue in education. So we are not given the issue explicitly, but it's implied. It is your duty then to find what the subject is, and the restrictions would be that particular topic you choose. For example, you choose gender, you choose class. That's the restriction. So when you are going to research, you are going to focus on gender, and the instructions are critically discussed. And these instruction words are the guiding are the guiding words that tells you what you need to do in this essay. So if the essay says critically discuss, that means you want to rely on a variety of theories examining the strengths and weaknesses of those particular theories you are discussing, and assessing their various merits for practice or for issues that are relevant in that particular theme. Therefore, it's not a matter of describing the issues, but you are critically evaluating. You are bringing up the theories, highlighting their significance. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And here on the screen, here are some of the instruction words for your own future use and what they mean. For example, you could be asked to analyze, compare, contrast, discuss, and summarize. But in this particular case, we are focusing on critically evaluating a particular contemporary issue by relying on literature in that particular field. So that's how you break down the essay. So the subject give you a general idea of which general area you want to focus on. The restrictions narrow down the topic to the specific settings. It could be settings, time, a geographical area, or a particular age group. And the instructions tell you what you need to do in the essay. Therefore, when you reach your overall conclusion, you should the instruction words should assist you to evaluate or to assess whether you have answered the question. If you go on at the end, I will provide a checklist of the things that you need to check for your essay to be critical. And if you are satisfied that your essay answers all those particular checkpoints, then you should be on the right track. If you can go on to the next slide. Right. Now, if you are given an essay, an essay could be divided into three parts. You have your introduction, the body of the essay, and the conclusion. The introduction is normally one paragraph text that focuses on a summary of the issues that you will be discussing in the issue. It also highlights the major perspectives that you will be discussing in that particular essay. So if it is, say, an essay on a contemporary issue such as class, you then might want to say, how is a class viewed? What are the major perspectives? You could isolate maybe the functionalist view of class. You could then look at the Marxist view of class. You could then look at neoliberal perspectives of class. But then in this particular case, say you are looking at this contemporary issue with regards to England, then you might want then to look at how class affects educational outcomes. For example, in the press, there are issues that are discussed on a regular basis that relate to inequality in education, in the education system of England, the widening gaps that are there between the various classes. So you then want to look at the differential outcomes within students from different classes, from, say, a functionalist position, a Marxist position, from a neoliberal position. I'm going to fill you in with some views of each perspective as a way of deepening how we critically look at these issues. So in your introduction, sum up, I'm going to give you an example that highlights some of these issues. So sum up the main perspectives you are going to be dealing with. And if there are any differences in those perspectives, you could just highlight them. And mind you, these are just 200 words for, say, 2,000 word essay, or if you are writing a 3,000 word essay, it should be around 300, because your introduction and conclusion should be about a tenth of the whole essay. Yeah, so you are just highlighting these issues briefly. And if it is a question that requires you to take a position, even if it is not, we always expect you at master's level to state your position with regards to these issues. And your position will be in the form of a thesis statement. This is how you, the line of argument that you are going to take in discussing the essay. So now let's see an example of a typical essay. So as you can see in that particular essay, I have highlighted key issues. That means a summary in response to the key characteristics of an introduction that we discussed. And on the left, you can see key perspectives there in my thesis statement. I will ask you to take 2 to 3 minutes to read that introduction. Then we'll have a discussion after that. Right. I hope everyone has finished reading that text. From the key things that we discussed in the last slide, can you see what's missing in those issues that I highlighted? I listed them, but some of them are missing in this particular introduction, and I want you to identify which aspect is missing. Anyone who can, please feel free to type your answers in the chat box. Okay, right. I highlighted in the previous slide that you need to make a summary of the key issues. And as you can see here, the key issues are highlighted in the first 5 lines. Then the next 3 lines highlights the key perspective, which are the liberal, neoliberal perspective, also I talked of the functionalist approach, and then I went on to give my thesis statement. So in the discussion, that means a recurring theme or the thread of the essay will revolve around a demonstration that the education system in England is inequalities that have an economic basis, or they are determined by how the society is structured. For example, you look at Marxists, they see inequalities is caused by how the economies are structured and the whole society is structured. And hence, education is seen as a mirror image of how the economy is organized, and the dominant class then reproduce these class structures in the various sects of the society, such as education, to maintain their dominance. And Marxist and critical discourse theorists see this as a problem. Now, you will see when we discuss the main paragraphs of the essay, how then this theme is going to be demonstrated through the evidence, through examples, through an examination of the theories. But now, I have asked you what's missing in this essay. What's missing in this essay is a definition of class, because when you deal with issues that could be interpreted differently, you also need to define these terms. I couldn't define class in this paragraph because I felt I needed more space to delve into the definition of class, because there is no agreement in terms of how class is defined. A functionalist or a neoliberalist would define class differently from a Marxist. Therefore, in the next paragraph will focus on defining class from various perspectives. And as class is defined, you don't simply isolate one writer to say so and so says class is. It would be good to read various definitions from a school of thought and give a general definition, and then perhaps in brackets you name drop those particular writers to say class is, and this is a common definition from these particular writers. If you can go to the next slide. Right. So you define a class from those using a wide variety of references. Now, once you have defined it from a particular perspective, you need to go on and define how another perspective might see a class, how they define class. And again, you rely on a variety of writers, because giving just one writer is not sufficient, because it shows you didn't read widely. It's a superficial exploration of issues. Now, once you have defined, shown these differences in definition, try to find some common elements within these particular definitions. And these are the common elements then you are going to use as a springboard to discuss the issue of class. So you could say common elements from both the neoliberal and Marxist perspective are that classes are two distinct groups of people in society that are divided by their economic status. So generally, that's all these definitions revolve around those definitions. Therefore, now when you are discussing, you are focusing on these agreement points to say what causes then these differences. They are economic in nature, and these economic differences project them in various arms of society, such as education. Right. So that's about it on definition. So when you write your essay, keep in mind that key concepts need to be defined. If it is gender, then define a gender, how it is seen by from different perspectives. Pull up the common threads and use those common threads then to move your essay forward. Now, let's look at what a coherent paragraph is. There are various approaches to writing a paragraph, but I find this structure quite appealing, where you start with your point, then you go on to give the evidence, you explain, you provide some examples. It could be in form of statistics, illustrations, and you link. So that's the structure. And as we go on to see a proper example of an essay, an example of a paragraph in the slides below, I'm going to show you each of these aspects in the essay. If we can move to the next slide. Right. So once you've done your introduction, you have done your definitions, maybe in the second paragraph, because if you are discussing a very wide issue such as class, I would advise do the definition in a separate paragraph to clarify issues, to clarify and make the reader sure of what you mean by class, what are the different perceptions, and so forth. Now, when you go on to write your essay, now you are beginning to unpack those issues that you have highlighted, you have summarized in your essay. You are building up explanations and arguments, opinions, and facts. And you are using examples and evidence from your reading to support your claims. And these ideas ought to be presented in a logical manner, making linkages between points, and each paragraph should deal with a central issue and have evidence to support it. Say, for example, the topic that we are talking about now, you might want to start by presenting what functionalists view class as, and how they see the organization of education in terms the various classes. Just to sum up, those who have done some bit of background reading on class, the functionalist perspective see society as a system, and the various systems in a society. It could be the various classes, it could be the various components of society, such as education, the economy, the politics. They are seen as segments that work in harmony with each other, and each is necessary for the smooth running of the whole. So for society to function, the functionalist perspective would argue that these classes are necessary because they maintain balance and harmony in society. Whereas a Marxist or a critical theorist would say, no, this is wrong. The inequalities that we see in education are a reflection of how society is organized to benefit a few on the top. How capitalist societies are organized, the dominant classes presiding over the dominated. Therefore, in education, that's why we see these differences and these inequalities. And these inequalities and unhealthy, they need to be dismantled. That's the Marxist view. But then when you try to dismantle and reorganize society, that's upheaval. That's you are creating a revolution. These are radical changes. And is it really feasible? Is it desirable for society? So as you offer this criticism from various angles, the Marxist or critical discourse theories have some very sound criticism, but then what you might want to ask, is it practical? Is it not destabilizing? So even though it is criticism that is sound, but then it may not be realistic. So as you argue your cases, be balanced, be even if you agree with the criticism, but then also look at the weaknesses to say, yes, this is sound. Society needs to be reorganized. There need to be changes. But if these changes are radical and destabilizing for society, are they any good in the final analysis? So they may not. So it could be a matter of creating a balance, getting a middle road solution to the issues. So it could be now you talk of neoliberal education, which is based on market economic principles such as privatization, competition, and competition, and the issue of freedom to participate. So you are looking at these issues, which then mean that education is gets marketized. People are free to set up academies. Those who have money, they are free to send their schools to schools that are well resourced. But then all this is in the name of competition, competition which brings efficiency. That's a very credible value and principle. But then you might then say, even these economic principles are sound, and they bring about an efficient economy. But we also look at the downside, the inequalities. Are they really good for society? Are they not destabilizing on the one hand? These disgruntled groups of society or classes, how do they view this? So when you argue out, see all those limitations, look at all those advantages, and be fair with each particular perspective. Do not just highlight that perspective you think it favors your own situation. You could be from a disadvantaged class, then you say, this is a credible perspective, but then look at the weaknesses as well. So detach yourself from these issues and see them from a very realistic point of view. So as you argue, you are making a critical judgment of the relative merits of each perspective and presenting their strengths and weakness, which then leads to certain conclusions that you make. And these conclusions are your voice, because as you write, your lecturers need to see your own voice. What do you make of these issues? How do you arrive at well-reasoned conclusions based on sound evidence that you gather through your reading? And by so doing, you bring together, you tie up all these arguments and reach a certain positions on the issues. Are there any questions so far? Okay. If there are no questions, we will proceed and look at some models that you can use to generate critical thinking. Now, here is a model that starts from description going to analysis and evaluation. Now, we talked of the functionalist view, the Marxist view of class. Yeah. So you start by explaining what it is, but don't put much focus on the what, when, who, where, the description. You only highlight the salient points, because at master's level, your emphasis should be more on the analysis, right? You are explaining the functionalist perception of class. You might want to dig deeper. Why do functionalists or neoliberalists maintain on the orderly function of society and the maintenance of harmony, this system? Do you think this perception reality works of reality works for all the classes? Maybe not. So you begin to ask why. Yes, they are doing that in order to maintain their own dominance. How do they maintain this dominance? Through an ideology that fosters a type of thinking that this reality is normal. This is what society ought to be. There should be harmony. There should be a maintenance of this functioning, the harmonious functioning of each particular system, one reinforcing each other. They should not be in opposition. They should not clash. They should not oppose each other, but then they are there to reinforce each other. But then a Marxist would say, no, this is simply brainwashing. It's an ideology that is meant to brainwash the people. They call it the opium of the people. So you might want to look at issues from that angle. So you begin to make an analysis, and that will lead you to an evaluation to say, okay, so this theory is not fit for purpose. It needs really to be challenged. If it is the functionalist view, it needs to be challenged, because the idea of projecting these classes is a reified form of status quo, which should not be changed, something that is sacred, is not is not ideal. It's a false narrative. So you are beginning to then moving on to analysis. Then if you say, yes, some harmony is necessary, but then things cannot go on. This inequality, these achievement gaps in education, they need to be addressed. So what's next? Therefore, maybe some government intervention in how education policy is formulated, and a reining on how capitalist enterprise is practiced. Certain excesses within the capitalist system need to be put under scrutiny and reined in, so that there are no wide gaps that negatively affect certain sectors of society. And if so, what's next? So what if? Yeah. So you are saying, okay, if these changes are put in place, so what? That means these changes need maybe to be reinforced with proper policing from time to time, proper checks and balances. How do you maintain these balances? Maybe create institutions that safeguard the welfare of the various classes. So that's a model to generate critical thinking, and it's very helpful when you begin to look at these issues and the perspectives. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, so when you are critically analyzing these issues, try to identify the significance of theory. We talked of the strength and the weakness, use evidence to argue, evaluate alternative viewpoints. So on the point of alternative viewpoints, in any given paragraph, you should demonstrate wide reading, even in an area where writers agree. We want to see a variety of writers who reinforce maybe a similar point. However, demonstrate also differences within that particular perspective. What are the what are the differences? However minor, we want you to show that awareness that even within a particular perspective, there are also differences. Offer alternative viewpoints and analyze these and arrive at a well-balanced conclusion. And as you argue these cases, we expect you to be balanced and use and be fair-minded. However, when you deal with each of these issues, we want you to question everything that you discuss. So as you discuss, show an element of skepticism, what Cottrell calls polite doubt. So it's not a matter of refusing the evidence, but you are putting the evidence to scrutiny. You are only accepting the evidence on the basis of its merits. And as you make your conclusions, do not take extreme or absolute positions, because those can be dangerous in academic writing. We expect you to use what is called hedging language that suggests a conclusion to say, given this state of affairs, it would seem this trend points to this, or the general trend is that, or a conclusion that could be reached from these issues is. You are not taking an extreme position to say the functionalist view is totally wrong. Therefore, I don't agree with it. We are not taking that. We are only pointing weaknesses to say, given these shortcomings of the functionalist view, it would seem in some respects it may not be helpful to use as a framework to address inequalities that are affecting our education system. And as you do so, synthesize your arguments and reach some well argued conclusions. If we can go to the next slide. Right. So when you are looking at these issues and you are criticizing, try to look for some phrases that are effective and appropriate in highlighting some of these criticism. The Manchester Phrase Bank contains some of these useful phrases, for example, where you are introducing questions, problems, and limitations. You can see a list of phrases that I have put there, offering positive evaluation or offering a constructive suggestion. So you can go onto the Manchester Phrase Bank and look for yourself and see how, as you tackle each paragraph, what are the relevant phrases that you can use. If we move to the next slide. Right. So here is an example of a paragraph that I've crafted. And as you can see, I put the various sentences in different ink to show what sort of skill is being demonstrated. For example, the first is a topic sentence. Then we go on to the main idea. The main idea, because when we look at the education system in England, it's guided by a liberal ideology, which draws its principles from liberal economics, where economic competition and freedom of choice are seen as essential to a successful economy. And these concepts are projected into education in the form of deregulation, privatization, and marketization. So you can see I have presented those ideas and taken them from a neoliberal perspective. But then I went on to make a critique of these concept from a Marxist point of view. So here critics think these key guiding principles of liberal economics and liberal education are responsible for inequality. And I have demonstrated the inequality by a citation, which shows the widening gap, achievement gap between the less children from the working class and those that are from the middle class. So once you make a claim, like what I've done in green there, I provide the evidence. You can see I provided the writers as well. Now you can see after that, I go on to further reinforce my point, saying these inequalities are seen from a Marxist or a critical theorist point of view is emanating from structural inequalities that are in the economy and projected in the various superstructures of the society, such as education and other arms of the superstructure. But then I don't simply end there. I then go on to look at what is the counter argument that is given by the defenders of liberal policies. For example, they would say these students who are failing, it's not the system, it's because they are at risk or lacking in some aspect. But then here I'm saying this is being used to really as a diversionary tactic to draw attention away from the structural conditions that the student face. Yeah? So you can see I'm bringing in a number of strands in the argument, but as I go, I haven't really concluded in this paragraph, but then I'm saying, despite these claims by those in defense of these policies, the low achievement rates from among working class background students are real. And this issue will be explored deeper in the next paragraph. And remember, when we said when you are discussing a paragraph, you use point, evidence, and link. So here I'm linking to say these issues that I have used to spark debate are then going to be explored in the next paragraph. So these linkages are necessary as you write, link your paragraph to the next, and the next is also linked to the previous to maintain a flow and an argument that is consistent. So you can see here, I have highlighted both sides of the argument, but as I close my paragraph, I close it on the note that these inequalities are real. Therefore, I am reinforcing my thesis statement, which says structural inequalities are embedded within society and within education. Right. So that's how you might begin to argue, making your arguments critical, looking at the various viewpoints. Can we go to the next slide? Right. So now, having done that, I'm not going to. Then you might go on to discuss various aspects of the essay. You could do 3-4 paragraphs, but patterning them along the lines of the paragraph that I've given you. Now, when you get your conclusion, you refer back to the title, which which talks about inequalities in education. You are now reaching an overall conclusion. And already in the thesis statement, we have made a claim that these inequalities are caused by an equal distribution of resources, the structural inequality that exists in the economy, and hence projected into the superstructure arms, the superstructural arms of society, such as education. So you are making that you are reinforcing that particular view that you have provided in your thesis statement and runs through the thread of your essay. And once you have reinforced that, then dwell on the main arguments that you have used to demonstrate that particular statement or your thesis, that claim. What issues did you use to argue your thesis statement? And say if an essay requires you to take a position, you need in the conclusion to state what that position is. And your conclusion should be consistent with what you have presented in the essay. And again, when you conclude, try not to put new issues in the conclusion. And normally, I don't reference in the conclusion nor in the introduction. As you can see in my essay, I have just treated the issues generally. However, you are not prevented from highlighting the major theorists in the introduction if you think that will make issues clearer. So there you are. Now we want to go on and discuss how you reference your reference your ideas within the paragraphs. I've in the paragraphs that I've shown you the especially the main paragraph. They were references, but then we want now to discuss how you do this. So the reason why we reference is we want to avoid plagiarism, which is plagiarism can manifest itself in various forms. It could be copying other people's work word for word, making minor changes to it, using other people's ideas without acknowledging, or even paraphrasing. That means using your own words to interpret other people's ideas, but without acknowledging, right? So all those things are, all those characteristics are come and can be classified as plagiarism. So let's look at the next slide. Right. If you look at that example there, it says children learn through imitating adults. But another contrasting idea says children have an inbuilt ability or a mechanism to learn language called the language acquisition device. Yeah, this is what I have read. These are not my ideas. Before I started reading, I didn't know what was called the language acquisition device. Nor did I know that children imitate adults. I might have an idea, but I didn't have proof to say, yes, they imitate adults. Here is the evidence. But I read these ideas. Therefore, you can isolate two ideas here, and they need referencing. If they came from one author, that's fine. You can then say so and so says that. But if they are from different authors, then you need to show that. You can see here, I've said Skinner, open bracket, 1957, comma, quoted in Gillibrand et al., which means and others, 2016, close bracket, claims that children learn language through imitating adults. Right. You might then wonder, why did I put et al.? I'll explain in a minute. But this sort of quotation is called secondary referencing because here I read Gillibrand's book. I didn't read Skinner, but I read Skinner's ideas in Gillibrand. What it is when I then go on to write a reference list, I'm not going to include Skinner because I didn't read Skinner. I read Gillibrand. So get that clear. Now, here is another format of referencing. Chomsky says that I go on to write the whole sentence and I put my citation at the end. And when you put your citation at the end, everything goes in brackets. I'm not repeating Chomsky here because I have already mentioned Chomsky, so I'm not repeating in the brackets. But if I say another view says that, then that means I need to then mention the person who said that view, so that Chomsky would come inside the bracket, comma, 1965, cited in Miles and Mitchell, comma, 25, in close bracket. But then because I have mentioned, I will simply open bracket, put the name of the year of the publication first, and then where it's cited from. So that's secondary referencing. If we can move to the next slide. Yeah, so when you do your in-text citation for one author, it's you can state Carden 2019 argues that, or you can write the whole statement, then at the end you you put the name of the author, the surname, that is, comma 2019, no initials, no first names in in-text citations. And if it is a direct quote, like the one next, you need to put the page number and put those words that you took directly from the text in quotation marks. And as you can see, my quotation is very short. So when you are citing, avoid citing more than one sentence, more than one line. 2 lines, that's quite a lot, unless it's a very large piece of work like a dissertation. So confine yourself to highlights. It could be phrases that reinforce the point or strengthen the point you are trying to make. If we can go to the next slide. Now, when you do 2 authors, you cite both. For example, Marmot and Wilkinson 2011 claim that if it is 3 authors, all the 3 are listed, but from 4 authors, then you begin to use et al. It's just the surname of the first author and et al. I was teaching this same subject this week, and someone asked me, which author do we choose if there are 4? Do we choose the one we prefer, or it's the first author that is written in the acknowledgement page where the authors are written. So it's just the surname of that author and et al. And between that author and et al, there's no comma, because when we write one author, the author is and the data separated by comma. It's just et al, then full stop, then open bracket, then you put the year. If it is at the end of the sentence, it's the surname of the writer, et al. Dot. The dot is then followed by a comma, then the year. Yeah? So those minute details will determine quite a lot in how you cite. You need to be very exact with how you cite, because if you were to get a distinction, that can really pull you down. So you look at Smith et al. There, there are 2 errors there. There should have been a full stop after et al. Yeah, that's a typing error there. Yeah, so it's Smith et al. There should be a full stop before 2005, and there. But then if it is at the end of everything goes in brackets, Smith there, et al, then full stop, comma, then 2005 and close bracket. If we can move to the next slide. Right, now, in some cases, you might want to cite corporate authors or organizational authors like the BBC, Department for Education. When you are citing those, for example, you might have read something from the BBC, but there's no identifiable author, or the Department for Education, it could be a policy document. Take that organization as the author. So you could say the DFE says that. But then when you write, it's always a good practice to say, first time you write the name of that organization in full, then you put abbreviations in italics. But then when you write second time, it's now permissible to just write the abbreviations, because you have already told us what those abbreviations stand for before. If we can move to the next slide. Now, we talked about secondary referencing, and I've already shown you an example. So here is a further example. right. Say you have read Marmot and Wilkinson, but then in Marmot and Wilkinson, there is Glenister's ideas that are quoted. So you then treat it as a Glenister because he's the originator of those views. Open bracket 2007, comma, cited in Marmot and Wilkinson, comma, 2011, says that. Or at the end, it could be a disease ought to be viewed from a mouth perspective. Then open bracket Glenister 2007, comma, cited in Marmot and Wilkinson, comma, 2011, close bracket. And when you get on to your references, Glenister doesn't need to appear in the reference list because you haven't read the book. You put the book that you have read, in this particular case, Marmot and Wilkinson. If we can go to the next slide. Now, when you write your reference list, you arrange the reference list according to the surnames of the writers. And in this particular case, the initials of those particular writers needs to appear. In the in-text citations, we said initials and first names don't appear, but now in the reference list, they appear if it is a book. So it's a surname of the author and initials, then year of publication, title of the book. You see, I put there that in italics, place of publication and publisher. Then for journals, it's author, surname and initials, year of publication in brackets, title of the article, name of the journal in italics, and the title of the article needs to, for journals, everything needs to be capitalized except words such as is and. So all those words need to be in capital letters. Then you put the volume, issue number, page numbers, and if it is an online publication, you put the DOI, which is the digital object identifier. Now, what major differences can you notice between a journal and a textbook? Any contributions from the guests? Okay, so the major differences you can see is for a journal, you don't need place of publication and publisher. And for a journal, you would need additional things as volume, page numbers, and issue number. So there you are. So those are the major highlights of this session, how you structure your essay, how you go on to critically look at issues, and how you reference. If there are any questions, I'm happy to address them for, say, 5 minutes. We have overshot our time, but if you want to leave, you are free to leave. Those who want to ask some questions, I'm happy to entertain a few questions. If you can unmute yourself, maybe we have just a short plenary before we leave.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to know, when you reference journals, if you put the name of the journal in inverted commas, I saw it on right side them right.
Yeah. Yes.
You put them in inverted commas, the title of the journal.
Yeah, the title of journal, yes. It should be, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Marks, yeah.
Somebody is asking, actually, what does DOI mean? Johannes.
Okay. Yeah, I did I did explain that digital object identifier.
And someone else, that's very helpful. And the other, and maybe you'd explain what a digital object identifier is and how it's used.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a number that is used to identify that particular publication.
That's helpful. Then someone is asking, Tasha is asking, how do we do the word count for in-text citations? So, yeah, in-text citations, I think it may, Johannes, do you know, are they counted in the overall word count or not?
Yeah, well, the general guidance is everything that you put inside your essay in response to the question is counted. What is not counted is your references and appendices.
Okay.
Everything contained within the essay is counted.
That's helpful. And the other thing is just to give general guidance, guys, on the use of quotes and direct quotes. Someone asked if quotes were in italics. They generally aren't, though I responded yes by accident. Sorry about that. If you are quoting from someone directly, you put it in inverted commas, and then you also have to give a page number. But if it's a block quote, you can present it a bit differently with a space above and below and an indentation. That's generally the way it's done. Am I right, Johannes?
Exactly. And normally, say you are writing a dissertation, they might be need for you to put, say, a paragraph. You indent that and you leave a space up and below.
Then the other thing is just in terms of the number of block quotes. So I will just contrast this with we have, Johannes, you may or may not be aware, on this program, there's a lot of pre-developed content which is published to, make it easier. It really takes the place of some of the lectures. So there's pre-developed content, and the block quotes may or may not be used quite liberally in that. That's actually to save you having to read and find multiple sources. However, when you are writing an essay, we don't want you to use big chunks in a 2,500 word portfolio, part of a half-year assignment. If you use multiple block quotes, it can be seen as padding. So you should keep the number of large quotes to a minimum. Like we would say, a good guidance would be no more than 4 or 5. Be very judicious, and it's much more preferable to paraphrase. Is that not right, Johannes? Because it shows you have made the information your own.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the correct position. Because by citing, say, 2 lines, it shows you are not able to interpret what the writers are saying, but you should use quotations very sparingly, ideally put in phrases or less than a line. That would be ideal, because you are simply capturing highlights from what the writers say to reinforce the points that you have already made. But then you cannot go on and cite the whole sentence from a writer and claim it as your own response to an essay, because then it shows lack of engagement with the text, and you are not and inability to interpret the sources.
And you're asking about the font. It should be Lucinda size 10 and double spacing throughout, right? I'm not quite sure. I think that's right, Johannes. Is that correct?
Well, it depends with the particular departments. I tend to use Calibri and Arial. Those are normally fonts that are recommended generally, but then it all depends with what the lecturers want. So I wouldn't
just
really...
check what it says in your in the module guide or on the assignment briefing. It will be up in Moodle on your home page, and that guidance is available. That sort of stuff, I'm afraid, doesn't stick in my head.
Yeah, I tend to use Calibri 12.
Calibri is nice and clear.
Or Arial. There's no hard and fast rule, but then if you use some of these fancy fonts, then they make your work illegible, and your lecturers may not be able to understand what you some of your ideas. So just use a font that is accessible to everyone.
Yeah, that's right. Someone here is saying that it's what the information says in the guide. So yes, then you can use that. But I don't think any of our tutors would fault you if you use something which looked equivalent. No one is going to actually, unless you use something very, off the wall, no one's going to really worry too much. And double spacing is really about accessibility. Those things make it easier for people to read volumes of material. So it's really being kind to your tutor and to your marker, and that's in your interests to keep us in a good humor.
Okay, I can't see any more questions. However, should you have any questions or you need further support from me, my email was there in the first slide at the beginning. So once the slide is shared with you, you are free to get in touch with me at UEL. We normally use Teams, so you can just type in an email message, then I can book you for an online support session should you need one. Okay, so I thank you for attending the session, and I wish you good luck with your studies. Continue to work hard, read widely, put into practice the issues that we have discussed, be in the habit of citing a variety of sources, look at the views, weigh their strengths and weaknesses. Once you do that, then you are developing in the right direction as a student. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. On behalf of Siobhan and myself, I'd like to say thank you all for attending, and thank Johannes for a wonderful, very informative and well-structured session. And the best of luck, everyone, and keep in touch with us, and we'll be happy to support you in any way we can. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.